Assalamu alaikum. You're watching Views and News, and I'm Faisal Rahman live from our Islamabad studios. Today, we'll be talking about this very historic story, and that is about the current president. I don't know whether I should be calling him the current president or what exactly his status is, but Donald Trump, the 45th president of the United States of America, has been impeached for the second time. Now, interestingly, this time, 10 of his fellow Republicans voted against him for impeachment. Just imagine. And rest, the number is right in front of you, what you have seen. So now, talking about Donald Trump has become the first president in the United States history to be impeached twice. President Trump was charged with incitement of insurrection over last week's deadly storming of Congress, in which 5 precious lives were lost. It further says that House Democrats introduced an article of impeachment against the president for his role in inflaming a mob. Further adds that violence and vandalism have no place in our country. No true supporter of mine would ever endorse political violence. Now, this is the statement he gave while he was addressing, and I'll talk about that also later in our program. And then he says that federal authorities brace for a wave of armed protests in all 50 state capitals, Washington, D.C., in the days leading up to the inauguration. And now it has also been reported that more than 20,000 law enforcement agents would be protecting on that particular day. I'm just talking about the Washington, D.C. area. 20,000. Now, this is the number. And those who have are either from the military police or those who have had the prior experience of handling guns would only be allowed to carry weapons. Rest will not be. So you can well imagine the kind of security they're talking about, because there is a very high probability that violence can take place on that particular day. But let's see how it goes. But interestingly, when I was listening to Nancy Pelosi, the Speaker of the House, she was very straight, and she said that we mean business and this man should be impeached. And now the story is that the case would proceed after the 20th. I'm not sure what exactly is that supposed to mean. We'll be asking our guests about that, either to make sure that he should not contest for another term, maybe in 2024, or if he's impeached twice, what would be his status in that regard. So a lot of ifs and buts. But interestingly, as I said, 10 of his fellow Republicans voted against him. All the rest of the Democrats voted against him, and then around 11 people did not vote, and the rest, they voted in favor of him. But still, the equation was so different that the man has been impeached. Now, to talk about this, before taking any further time, let me introduce you to our panelists, and then we will start the question answer session. We have with us in our studio, on my right, is Dr. Nazir Mahmood Saab, senior columnist, journalist, and an analyst. Thank you very much, Dr. Saab, for your time, sir. And we also have Dr. Rifat Hussain Saab, senior strategic analyst, on the Skype, joining us, and we'll be talking in our today's program. And we'll also be talking to Imran Jan Saab, who is a columnist and a journalist based in United States of America, and he is also going to join us on the Skype. Imran, thank you very much for your time as well. Now, Nazir Saab, let's start off from you, sir. First of all, when you heard this news regarding, because we were all thinking about it, and then we were not sure whether he's good. He could have been impeached, but we were not sure whether he'll be or not. But the House took a very, very, I think, a strong decision. And interestingly, 10 of his own Republican fellows voted against him, and they wanted him to be impeached. So the number was very different. Those 20, it made a difference, or 20 actually. Man is impeached not once, twice in the history of the United States of America. What is this supposed to mean now, sir?
Very interesting situation developing, and as I see it, it has, so to say, the good, the bad, and the ugly part to it. The good is that finally even Republicans have realized that their choice was wrong, and Trump has been doing tremendous harm to democracy, not only in America, but overall setting a very wrong example. So the good part is that Republicans started ditching him, and 10 Republicans voting for impeachment means that, you know, when it goes to the Senate, they need more, you know, in Senate they need in all 67 votes, 2/3 majority. 50 are already with Democrats. 10 Republicans have already voted. So, they just need 7 more Republicans to finally reach a conclusion that
To get to the magical figure of 67.
67, just 7 more votes. So, this is the best part, good part. So, this is one political good part. Another good part of the whole game is that the role of American armed forces. They have very clearly, they wrote a letter addressing civilians and even ex-soldiers and present soldiers that our commitment to constitution and law is there, and we will not support any unconstitutional or any illegal turbulence in the capital. So, that is very positive aspect of the whole thing. So, this is good part. The bad part is that still there are Republicans who wanted to protect Trump. Mike Pence, he could have invoked Amendment 25th, but he refused because he was probably looking at his own chances of next presidential elections probably. And other Republicans also, this is bad part of the game. And then there is an ugly part of it. And that ugly part is that they have now thousands of armed pro-Trump people who are pining for blood and who are ready to not only stage demonstrations in 50 capitals of 50 states of America, but even Washington DC itself is kind of under siege.
Yes.
So, around 15 to 20,000 soldiers or security personnel being deployed to protect Capitol and White House and Washington DC itself.
Yeah.
It is a major, game changer in American history. They have not seen any such event after the Civil War, probably after 150 years they are witnessing all this. So, this is the ugly part, and the ugly part from Trump's side is also that he may emerge, though his political career is over, but even if the case goes against him, he still has, he might emerge as a white supremacist. He might form,
I think he has already done that.
Yes, but he can, do more harm because still there are white supremacists who are looking for a leader. If you remember 100 years back, Ku Klux Klan and all. So, there is a chance in America that this racism, so Trump may emerge as a racist leader inciting more violence. That will be the ugly part of it.
Now, very interesting question actually, let me put it this way. When you talk about the arrests which have been made, few of these people who were arrested, few of them were serving military officers or people, right? And few were retired as well. Some of them were war veterans. Now, most of these people carry weapons. And the amount of weapons that were sold during the corona times and prior to the US elections, I think that is the biggest threat, because we all know that buying last night, I mean, that was there, that, people, there should be no vandalism, no sort of, uprising. People should remain calm. People should just, hold their horses.
Yes.
And let's not do anything that can harm the actual democratic process or democracy in United States of America. Yes. But do you think the people would listen to him now, sir? Will it make any difference?
I think there
he
will
did
not
not say sorry in that, in fact.
Well, there are
in his
armed,
speech.
You very rightly pointed out that there are armed former soldiers also, and there are armed civilians also. And that proves that within the US Army also there has been an institutionalized
And they've been posing threats to even Nancy Pelosi.
Yes. So, there are,
there
are racist elements within the US Army. Otherwise, who would kill innocent people in Afghanistan and Iraq? There have been cases where they just kill people purely based on racist hatred. So, of course, there is a chance of violence, but Republican Party is reaping what it sowed. It has been sowing. They have been supporting gun lobby, Rifle Association, though Democratic Party has repeatedly tried to pass laws against guns, but Republicans have been supporting that. And now all these people who have these guns, they are likely to come on the streets. But maybe it is my wishful thinking. I don't think that there will be major violence. Demonstrations will be held, but the way American Army has come out clearly, I don't think that they will tolerate any major violence. There might be, sporadic incidents, but there will be no major violence.
Now, Nazir Sahab, do you think there are differences within the ranks of maybe military out there, or some special services groups for that matter, or people have different opinions?
I don't think that within the American army there are groups or divisions. Otherwise, all army chiefs, it is not the land forces, but all army chiefs, they have collectively signed that letter committing themselves to the supremacy of law and constitution. That shows that there is no there might be individuals racists, but overall I think there is no major division.
And what about Nancy Pelosi a few days ago talking to the top general? How do you make what do you make out of that actually, and how do you see this particular, in fact, situation moving forward? Because Speaker of the House, a Democrat, calling the top US general, not the president or the vice president, and complaining that, listen, if this man does this, you're not supposed to do anything. Now, we have never heard of anything
Pelosi
of that sort
is a senior, not only senior politician,
she is
but
80 years old.
Yes, very senior politician, and to tell you the truth, I like her in the sense that she has been behaving very sensibly. She has proved herself to be a true Democrat. She has fought for the supremacy of democracy in America. So I don't think anything wrong if even president is inciting people to violence. There is always a chance of division in the army. So I think when Nancy Pelosi called army chief, probably she wanted to make sure and reiterate that the army has to come out very well, and after that probably they decided that they need, this is very unusual, the signing a letter and coming out from all army chiefs, this is unusual.
Oh yes.
So, and that was needed because they needed to send a very clear signal to the people that army stands with law and constitution.
All right, so we also been joined by Dr. Rifat Hussain Saab, senior strategist. Assalamu alaikum, Rifat Saab.
Ji walaikum assalam, Faisal.
Sir, thank you so much for taking out the time and talking to PTV World. Now, first of all, whatever you were witnessing on CNN last night, sir, what do you make out of it? What's happening out there? This is something, I mean, we have never seen it before, sir.
Well, of course, we are dealing with an unprecedented. We never had anticipated, not anybody had expected that the sitting president of the United States will which are his supporters to come out and and invade the Capitol Hill. So that what we are witnessing the last week is the unfolding of that trend, and the Democrats are determined to the by President Trump to sabotage their inauguration on January 20th, because we also have another number could increase, at least as of now, 1,000. Ceremony of President.
I think there's some disturbance in the telephone line, but Nazir Saab, yeah, would you like to respond to that point? Now, in fact, I had asked him a very open question, but said Trump impeached for inciting US Capitol riot in historic second charge. I mean, when you see this as the headline in any top newspaper, I mean, one would say like, hold on, I mean, am I dreaming or is it true? But sir, this is true. Now, so many people have been pardoned by him, including his son-in-law's father as well. And then on top, when we see that this man who can face so many criminal charges also now, sir, regarding the evasion of taxes, inciting violence again, I think this is a criminal charge, and he could be behind bars for that. I mean, is that the reason, sir, that the government or the House actually thinks that this ban or the trial should take place after a week once Joe Biden takes over as the president? Or do you think this should have been done much prior to that, sir?
Well, prior to that,
what difference will it make? I mean, that's the point.
Well, there are two aspects to this. One, definitely the charges, most of the people thought that he committed those offenses, that's why he was charged. Impeachment means he was properly charged. So, and then if you look at his statement and videos, clearly he prompted them. He said his words were, "You need to fight like hell." This was the expression that you used. You need to fight like hell to reclaim your country. and you cannot do this with weakness.
And the protesters were actually using his own words.
Yes,
When they
you
were
cannot
interviewed.
win with weakness. What that means? This is clear incitement to violence. So the charges are right. Now, your question that it should have been earlier, now it was already, because this violence took place 6th or 7th of January, last week. And after that, they acted as quickly as possible after some discussion, and the impeachment concluded yesterday. Now, the earliest, even if they wanted to initiate the case proceedings, they could have started it only 1 or 2 days earlier in Senate, 18th or 19th. So this was not possible. So anyway, this case is going to take place after Joe Biden takes over. Now, there are two possibilities that I see. One possibility is, and which should be done, that the case proceeds even after the departure of Trump, and the case reaches a certain conclusion. They bar him from occupying any other public office, or as you said, that maybe he can be put behind bars. Ideally, that should be done.
Even those, I would say, people or the congressmen who were inside the buildings, inside the Capitol Hill, they felt threatened. And we all witnessed what was going on
Yes.
on the television screen. So can each and every individual file a separate case against the president? Because his or her life was threatened, sir, and was actually threatened. 5 people died in the violence. And I was talking to one of the Republican supporter yesterday, and they said, you know what, that policeman died of heart attack. He wasn't killed. I said, listen, what could I say?
I don't think that individuals can bring out cases like this, but the impeachment is good enough. But the other possibility that I see is that, because the first 100 days for Joe Biden will be very important. These are important for any president, first 100 days. So there is a possibility, because Joe Biden has been talking about moving forward and uniting the country rather than dividing them. So there is a possibility that when Joe Biden takes over, he may announce that I am, pardoning him. So if that happens, that pardon is given, then probably Joe Biden will try
in the larger interest of the country.
In the larger interest of the country.
This normally happens in Pakistan,
so that
sir.
Joe Biden can concentrate on his own plan of 100 days. So there is a possibility, but ideally that should not happen. Ideally, the case should go on and reach its logical conclusion.
And the logical conclusion is the man should be behind the bars, whether he's the president or one of the richest men or whatever. It really doesn't make any difference.
I think I have no doubt that he has done
I hope
criminal
he has
activities.
understood the magnitude of the problem. Let me put this question to Dr. Rifat. He has been with us again. Dr. Saab, can you hear me clearly? I hope you can.
Yes.
All right. Now, Dr. Saab, we have with us Dr. Nazir Mahmood Saab, and he says that there is a probability that in the larger interest of the country, Mr. Joe Biden, the president-elect, can pardon Donald Trump.
Well, if he does pardon him in the larger interest of the country, so I do not see after the articles of impeachment are being presented to the U.S. Senate, and if the Senate upholds all the crimes, all the insurrection that Mr. Trump has tried to institute, just to and by the way, I should also mention one more fact, which is that even as of his last tweet, which was only about a couple of hours ago, he has not conceded the fact that that the election, and he continues to insist that he won the election. He was traveling in Air Force One jet, in which he gave an interview in which he said that he was talking to his close aides, and he said he insisted that I won the election. So as long as he persists with this attitude and with his arrogance and with his destructive behavior, I do not see any reason why the pardoning him by Joe Biden would change anything. It will only encourage the Trump supporters to come out in a greater force with a new momentum to do whatever they are doing. And the other option is that if Trump in the remaining few days that he has until January 20th, he has the option, and there is no constitutional prohibition on it, that he can not only self-pardon himself, but he can also pardon all the people, including his family, Jared Kushner, and his daughter, and all the people who have been supporting and showing loyalty to him, and he can pardon it. So, given his behavior, I think Joe Biden will have to think twice that if President Trump continues to defy the will of the American people and continues in his destructive ways.
Doctor, please explain me one thing.
Pardoning him would not achieve much.
All right. Now, Dr. Saab, for example, those 5 people who were killed in the violence, 4 of them were the protesters, 1 was a cop. And then the cop wasn't killed as such, he had a heart attack and he passed away. Now, what about the families of those individuals? Obviously, there is a clear-cut indication that the President of the United States of America incited violence that resulted in whatever we witnessed on the television screens.
Of course. And
so in that case, the President can also pardon him, sir?
Well, yeah, of course. Constitutionally, there is no prohibition on him from engaging in a self-pardoning act. At least to the best of my knowledge, there is nothing in the Constitution which debars him from pardoning himself and his family and his loyal supporters.
All right. And what about if that particular case is filed against him, or certain charges are framed against him after the 20th of January? What about in that case?
Well, there has to be criminal prosecution, because by Joe Biden's admission and by and the whole world watched these horrible events live on national television and global television on CNN, and there's no doubt that it was an act of insurrection, and it was an act of domestic terrorism. So if the people who engage in this kind of a behavior, and the president was the cheerleader for them, so pardoning him would require an extraordinary amount of concession to President Trump, and there are people who have already filed lawsuits against him, including some of the Democrats and some of the party caucus who think that President Trump went way beyond the power of the power and the immunity enjoyed by the President of the United States, and how dare he call his loyal supporters and call them out to invade the Capitol Hill. It's unprecedented. So, because of the gravity of his crime, I do not think it would be advisable for President Biden to grant him the pardon.
Dr. Rifat Hussain Saab, now we all believe that the Americans, they always wanted to have democracy in every country they have invaded. I mean, for some reason they always believed in democracy, and we always end up hearing what the presidents of the United States of America, they have said about the practice of democracy. Don't you think this man has made a fool out of himself, and even made the Americans look so bad when it comes to democracy, sir, that next time whenever somebody is going to talk about democracy from the American side, people have got plenty of responses now regarding this, that who is talking now? Come on.
Well, of course, Faisal, the America's image as the largest democracy, as the longest democracy, has been totally shattered by these events, and the President Trump and his loyalist supporters are singularly responsible for doing this incredible damage to America's reputation. Now, of course, whenever America would, they will issue human rights report, and they will, lecture the other countries that, your democracy is not perfect. Look what has happened inside the United States, because there's There is no terrorism from outside. It is a threat which has emerged from within, and if you read about the social background of those people who came out in such large numbers and they invaded the Capitol Hill building, these are not ordinary people. These are rich people. These are ideologues. These are Trump's loyal supporters. So, and of course, they are white supremacists. So people are watching this in horror. That how come Trump would not only incite these people, but with a gleeful impression on his face, would watch them engage in this wanton destruction. And the other thing which is very important for us to remember is that these people had not only come with the intention of invading the Capitol Hill building, but they had come with the guns, and they were ammunition, and they had sufficient ammunition on them that if President Pence, Vice President Pence, who was engaging in the counting of the votes, if they would not have discontinued with the meeting, a large-scale violence might have happened at the time when the insurrection took place. So, given the enormity of the crime or the horrendous consequences that could have followed from this insurrection, I do not think that anybody who is in a sane mind would consider granting him pardon, and would not like him to be escape the application of the American law.
Now, Dr. Saab, another quick comment before I go to Nazir Saab. On the 20th, on the inauguration day, obviously we have learned that around 18 to 20,000 law enforcement agents would be there. Few would be armed, few would not be armed. Do you see, because according to the feds, they have warned that extremists may be there, and there is a very high probability that they might carry out some sort of an attack maybe on Joe Biden or something of that sort. Do you see something of that sort happening? And not only in Washington DC, sir, I'm talking about the 50 other capitals. I mean, what sort of a protest do you see? Do you think people can get violent, or people will listen to what Donald Trump said last night, that no vandalism, nothing?
Well, Faisal, the Americans are really scared, because if you have of the 74 million people who voted for Trump, even a very tiny percentage of these people who get organized, and they are well-to-do, and they are white supremacists, so they would, if they come out marching in support of President Trump, who has not accepted the legitimacy of the incoming President Joe Biden. So anything can happen. Anything can happen. So in a way, the events of the last week have driven home the message to the Americans that nobody is safe unless the celebration or the induction of Vice President Joe Biden actually takes place. So there is a tremendous amount of concern in terms of security, in terms of anything going wrong, and the people who are in charge of this, they are calling the National Guard. They have mobilized the police from all corners of the world to make sure that his induction ceremony goes smoothly, and I would be very relieved person if something untoward does not happen.
All right. Now, we have also been joined in by Dr. Adil Najam. He is the Dean of Boston University, based in the United States of America. Dr. Saab, Assalamu Alaikum. Dr. Saab, thank you so much for taking out the time and talking to PTV World. Now, first of all, Dr. Saab, whatever you've been witnessing on the television screens, I mean, what have you are hearing regarding whatever is going on, whether you talk about Washington D.C. or the next week in particular. How do you see that, sir? Because whatever we have witnessed during the last week or so, that was unprecedented. Never thought that America would be experiencing such sort of issues. Your take, Dr. Saab.
Certainly, I think the events of last week and maybe even of this week were unprecedented. In some ways, I think they were not entirely surprising. They were unprecedented, they were shocking, they were sad, but in many ways, this is a storm that has been brewing up for a large amount of time, and not just during Mr. Trump's presidency. This is a society that has very, very, very deep fissures. Is broken, in fact, in politics at very deep levels. And what we saw was, the coming out of that. In some ways, I was thinking to myself, the 2021 certainly hasn't started in any way that we would have wanted. We thought 2020 was tough. But especially if I had it in my power, I would outlaw Wednesdays on or at least the first ones. The first Wednesday of this year, we had an insurrection. The second Wednesday, we had an impeachment. The third Wednesday, we'll have an inauguration. So hopefully that will be a more pleasant exercise. But I think, to your question, yes, the next week, the next days, is going to continue at the same at high levels of uncertainty. And in many ways, I think the whole year will be high levels of uncertainty for politics, because just because the transition will happen and a new president will come in will not mean that the wounds have healed. That doesn't mean that we will be able to put behind us all these things. The society is clearly broken. Impeachment will continue. Mr. Trump's shadow on U.S. politics, whether impeached or not, whether he's president or not, will remain deep and divisive for a long time.
Now, Dr. Saab, interestingly, whether we like Trump or we don't, the reality is that this man took the second highest number of votes ever in the history of any American election, and that is around 74 million. What people are fearing is that what if even 1% of those people come out on streets and protest, and what if they get violent? That is something everybody is concerned about. And secondly, Dr. Saab, also tell us, since you have talked about the polarization and the division within the American society, and it isn't, it became very clear during the Trump's time, but it was there obviously. It can't happen just in 2, 3, 4 years. Where will it lead America, sir? Because we look upon America as the first world country, the most powerful country, and then on top, when you talk about the superpower, that's again United States of America. Do you think the time has come that some other country is going to replace United States of America? And this particular incident, or in general, post-election results, the Americans, their power, that has been eroded.
The moral legitimacy has certainly been eroded, not just by these, but overall in the last many years. In some ways, I think you are right. The moral legitimacy of the United States in international affairs will have to be healed somehow by Mr. Biden, and is certainly under question. Right? So how do you say to others, your democracy needs to be improved? Or how do you say to others, democracy is a principle we stand on? And what we will see with Biden is trying to rebuild that. The source of American power, or any great power, certainly is military, certainly is economics, but it is never just those two things. Moral legitimacy is a very important component of great powers. And the U.S. had been very, blessed in that sense that they, even during the Cold War, were able to maintain a certain moral legitimacy. People looked up to them. And it is not just in these events, but even in the management of COVID. This notion that, anyone in the world would say, how is the U.S. doing it? Let's learn from them. Mm-hmm. And that question becomes now a real question. Is this the power that we learn from? But that doesn't mean that the U.S. is no longer a major power. Right? That's not how history works, that one incident happens. That is a long arc of history, and we are already seeing a major shift in that between the rise of the Chinese. But the U.S. still remains a major power, but it has very, very deep and serious wounds to heal, and that is the burden that Mr. Biden will have to carry. I should also note, because I think it is important, that while 74 million people voted for Mr. Trump, that doesn't mean that all of them are like the people who stormed the Capitol last week. It would be a mistake to think that, okay, his supporters attacked the Capitol, and therefore anyone who voted for him must be like that. I think there is a lot of soul searching happening within his constituency, right? Because 74 million is a very large number of people. And those questions are going to influence the future of the Republican Party, of Mr. Trump, and sort of the landscape of American politics. And, we in countries like ourselves know what divided politics is. And that is why I think we are so scared by it. Because divided politics never leads to healthy societies.
I think that's a very, very important statement, Dr. Saab, that you have given, but thank you very much for your participation. Now, that's what Dr. Saab said. I mean, when you are divided, there is a lot of problem ahead. Now, talking about, forget about the example of Pakistan, there is always a political division at every level, in every province, every city. I mean, there's so many different, issues attached to it also. But talking about the United States of America once again, now everybody is scared also. Everybody is uncertain. Everybody thinks that, anything can happen. But there are a lot of sane people in Republican body as well. Only a few can be, somebody or maybe a certain group can do violence of some sort. But sir, there is a clear-cut indication that the division or the polarization that was there, this time it really was visible on the wall, and it is going to grow further. So white supremacy, the white, I have an edge, I've got blue eyes, I'm blonde, I'm tall, and I'm better than you are because you're a black. Do you think this is going to be the future, sir?
Well, there are both possibilities. One is the negative legacy of Trump and how it moves forward. And negative legacy is what you just described. Trump has left the United States a deeply divided society. Not only
sir, we have always witnessed the division when you talk about the North or the Midwest or the South and North in particular. And then some sort, when you talk about California or the East Coast, I mean, mostly Democrats, right?
Yes.
So there is a very interesting mix out there as well.
Yes. So, Trump's legacy in terms of white supremacy and anti-immigrant and non-white attitude that he shows. He openly said that, this Black Lives Matter movement has done harm. And he, at that time also, he tried to say that, both sides should remain calm, though white supremacists were aggressors, blacks were not aggressors, but he tried to project as if both parties were aggressors. So these are negative points of his legacy. So if it goes forward, one, and the other positive outcome will test the resilience of American democracy. If American democracy is resilient, it will absorb this shock as a one-off event, and the new administration will try to heal the wounds, and a lot depends on the Republican Party leadership also. And we have seen Liz Cheney and Mitch McConnell, and there are others in addition to those
Mitch
10.
McConnell or so many others.
So many others who voted against Trump, and there are others. So I think Republican Party will learn its lesson the hard way. They have learned the hard way. They should have learned earlier. Probably they should have supported impeachment earlier. They didn't. So, what they did now, they must be regretting now. Because otherwise, things shouldn't have come to this pass.
Yeah.
They could have stopped it. So ideally, if Republican Party learns the lesson and changes its policy and never again nominates a kind of a paratrooper. Trump was a paratrooper, he projected himself as a non-political person who came and who was a Superman and who would
I came, I saw, and I conquered.
Yes, I conquered.
And I got impeached.
And surprisingly, the whole Democratic Party supported him. That was a shock shock for most
But
people.
sir, even then, if you remember, the late John McCain also opposed him on so many accounts, so many other people, because he wasn't an ideal orthodox Republican also. You know, last quick comment, sir, and that is about when we talk about Donald Trump, okay, whatever he's done, a lot of people believe that those white people who attacked the Capitol Hill, if they were Muslims or if they were black or Hispanics or non-whites, things would have been different.
Well, there
You
are
agree with
people,
that?
there are saying, yes, I agree with this point, that had they been blacks or Muslims or immigrants like from Latinos,
Yeah.
probably there would have been more bloodshed and the forces would have reacted much more violently.
Yeah,
At
that's
this
exactly my
time,
point
the
is, yeah.
forces were, they displayed restraint, which is good. But you are very right, and I agree with you that the crowd, if it had been a non-white crowd, probably there would have been much more bloodshed.
Like the word terrorist might have been used,
Yes,
and they would
yes,
have made a
there-
story
there
out
is
of
a possibility.
And another thing, sir, domestic media and international media, CNN versus Fox. I mean, a lot of Republicans, they have got a lot of influence on the media, the internal one. Do you think the media has also played a very negative role? Because when we see CNN, it's a different story altogether. It's totally anti-Trump. But when you talk about other news channels controlled by the Republicans, it seemed that, you know, this man is the victim.
Well, I mean, even in 2016, most of the of course, there was pro-Republican and pro-Trump media.
is always like that.
But mostly at that time also, most of the media channels were pointing out the negative aspects of Trump. I remember, you know, there were programs, but still Trump won. So even now also, so media is also
And he never
divided.
got along with CNN throughout his presidency. He would always call them fake news and, you know.
And there is a Jewish lobby also behind it. I think that, you know, because he did so much for Israel, the Jewish lobby did want him to win again. And the media that you are pointing out,
It's all
there
controlled by the
are
Jews.
Israeli hands behind that.
Yeah, well, interesting times ahead. Let's see when we meet again after the inauguration. I hope and pray lives are precious, that nothing happens of that sort, since America is one of the largest, oldest democracies, and
We wish
they
them
have
well.
their strength. We
We
wish
wish them well.
everyone well, and we wish, because, you know, if a superpower gets, I mean, if there's a problem, that is going to be a serious issue. But anyway, thank you so much, sir.
My pleasure.
And that's all we have for this week. Inshallah, I'll see you again. Till then, you take good care. Khuda Hafiz.